Hi, I'm Siobhán Fletcher and welcome to the latest edition of our newscast. I guess first of all, can you introduce yourself for me?
Yeah, my name is Joe Garcia. I'm the Interim Chief Executive at the Great North Air Ambulance Service.
So I guess first of all then, just on its simplest terms for our listeners, they might have heard us talking about the Great North Air Ambulance Service before and you know, the links to the island, but can you sort of just explain the relationship between the service and the Isle of Man?
Absolutely. So the Great North Air Ambulance Service is a helicopter emergency medical service that's been operating in the northeast and northwest of England. And in 2022, we undertook an arrangement with Manx Care to provide that same service. So that's providing critical pre-hospital emergency care to patients in the Isle. And we've been doing that quite successfully up until this point, up till the end of March, basically.
And so I guess what's that changing point at the end of March then? Is it just this sort of question around funding going forward?
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah, it is down to the question of funding. From the outset, Manx Care were paying the Great North Air Ambulance Service a retainer fee, and then we were then based on the number of taskings that we would make to the island, we were then receiving a tasking fee as well. Now, that retainer fee was intended to pay the significant upfront costs of preparing the aircraft, both of our aircraft, so that we could ensure that we could always provide a response when we were able to fly. It was to ensure that those aircraft were fitted with equipment to fly over water. So that's flotation devices for the aircraft, life jackets for our crew, and a life raft, along with an underwater locating beacon, should, heaven forbid, the aircraft have to ditch in the sea. So that all of that equipment has a significant cost to it, and that's what the retainer fee was intended to cover. And then we had what was in reality a nominal tasking fee, because it didn't actually relate to the true costs of tasking based on an hourly rate, if that makes sense. So that's how our arrangement was structured with the Isle.
So this week we kind of got the Manx Care mandate and the operating plan for this year, and that kind of set out, you know, various financial pressures facing Manx Care. So, you know, the air ambulance service was just one of a few that we kind of covered the other day in terms of, you know, another one was to do with air traffic control. You know, the fact that there's issues at our airport here on the island, and that has this knock-on impact. And then the air ambulance service was just sort of was mentioned within that section. But, you know, in response to that, the fact that they've kind of basically said that due to that cost, it's unlikely that, you know, the charity for one will be able to fundraise to the level that it needs to every year. In your statement to us today, you sort of say you're currently in talks with Manx Care in terms of what's going to happen going forward. Obviously, I'm not expecting you to comment on those talks, but are you kind of hopeful that some sort of arrangement can be made?
I'm always hopeful. I mean, the population of the Isle of Man have been very, very generous in their donations, but the donations alone do not cover the costs necessary to fund the service in its entirety. So we have been having negotiations with Manx Care, and I am awaiting a final response from them. Their statement to me was that from the end of March, they would no longer be providing the sort of funding that they have been providing to now. So unless they verify what exactly is happening, from the end of March, we will no longer be able to support the service over into the Isle of Man, unfortunately.
I suppose from your perspective then, I mean, obviously you guys are on the front lines of helping with patients when these incidents happen and you get called over. What would your feelings be in terms of how that would impact patients, or like, is it, I'm going to assume your feeling would be that this link needs to be sustained.
Well, absolutely. I think given the level and type of care that our critical care doctors and critical care paramedics provide is well over and above what a regular ambulance service would provide. And if you are in or have sustained a immediately life-threatening incident, then the benefits that our crews can bring um, are vital for the potential survival of patients. And we measure our successes in the form of unexpected survivors. And we have unexpected survivors every day, every week that we operate, be it whether that's over in the Isle of Man or whether that's predominantly in the northeast and northwest of England. And it's the critical care that we can bring to the roadside or the bedside, wherever, which is necessary in order to make the difference as to whether somebody survives or not. So it's really, really unfortunate that we find ourselves in this arrangement. But healthcare systems across the United Kingdom are very, very pressured, as you know, and this is probably just another another level at which that pressure is now reflecting in the type of care that can be provided. It's probably worth knowing that, the Great North Air Ambulance Service is entirely charity funded. We receive no direct funding from any government department at all, and it's a miracle sometimes that we are able to maintain the two aircraft that we've got, the critical care skills of the consultant doctors and critical care paramedics that we provide as crew on the aircraft.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned obviously that the health service across the whole UK and beyond is facing these pressures. Do you think maybe? I mean, I wonder what your experience is across the whole of the northwest and the northeast of England as well. I suppose for us it feels heightened in a way because we are this little island in the sea, so almost like not having that same air link or that same level feels. It may be extreme on a bigger scale. It feels a bit more scary because it's like, because we're in the middle of the sea. But I suppose do you face that challenge with the charity in general in terms of funding? Getting that funding to support, given that you are entirely funded from outside of government sources.
Absolutely, we have a core of fundraisers that work for us either as volunteers or in some roles as paid roles that are tirelessly fundraising, promoting the Great North Air Ambulance Service either through written communications or social media to generate the awareness of the general public, both in the northeast and the northwest, of the good work that we do and the vital service that we provide to patients that need our particular help. We work very, very closely with the statutory ambulance services here in the UK and on the Isle of Man to ensure that we are tasked to the right incidents and that we minimise the number of taskings that might not be appropriate, so that whenever we go, we need to go. And that same scenario and that same situation exists both in the northeast and the northwest. One of the differences there is that we're not having to fly over water, and it's the journey across the water that creates the necessity for the specialist equipment on the aircraft, and in order for that to be maintained. And it's the regular maintenance of that kit that generates this additional cost, which is why we can't just absorb that particular cost as a charity, unfortunately.
Yeah, because basically the Isle of Man, I suppose, outreach of the charity the Isle of Man there's that difference is that added level of risk, really, of being over the sea.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's only morally right that I ensure that our crews are appropriately equipped for any incident or emergency that might occur during that journey.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, I realise because you're in these ongoing conversations, so I can't ask you too much specifically about that. But I mean, if this service was withdrawn, I suppose would the charity welcome it being, reinstated at a later date?
Well, yes, absolutely. I think the issue at hand is that this kit needs to be maintained constantly. So we have certain, I suppose, points. So there are 2 calendar dates this year where we need to make a decision as to whether we invest in the continued maintenance of some of this kit or not. And as soon as we don't, we lose that ability to fly over water. To reinstate that will no doubt cost even more again, because once we've let that maintenance lapse, it needs to be reinstated.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because you mentioned that equipment in terms of if heaven forbid, the helicopter went down over the sea. It's that sort of equipment that, you wouldn't actually need if you weren't coming to the Isle of Man anymore.
Absolutely. No, we're even the large bodies of water in the UK aren't big enough to consider needing that equipment.
Right. So I suppose then at the core, we're at this impasse really of a bit of a use it or lose it scenario really in terms of your conversations with Manx Care in terms of trying to continue this then for the Isle of Man.
Unfortunately, yes. It's not a cost that GNAAS can absorb within the levels of charity funding that we receive from the Isle of Man, and it needs the equipment needs, or the servicing of this equipment needs to be funded in some way, shape or form.
Spot on. I think that's kind of all my questions in terms of, because like I say, I wanted that just explainer really so I can get my head around this. Is there anything else you want to add, or you're in the position to add, or should we sort of give you a shout once those talks are concluded?
Well, I'd just like to say that we are extremely grateful for the charitable funding that has been received so far from the public in the Isle of Man, and we would dearly love to continue providing this pre-hospital emergency critical care to anybody that needs our particular services. And it would be really, really beneficial, I think, if we could reach a conclusion that was positive to everybody. We are a charity. We do not make a profit. We need to cover our costs, though. That's the unfortunate necessity. And helicopters are expensive items to maintain and to run, but the speed at which we can provide care, the ability to set down right next to a patient in any particular setting does make us a service that are pretty much second to none.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.